Hey guys, Sue's here. Welcome back to another keto dinner recipes video. Today we are trying 4 different keto recipes. If you're already a subscriber here, you know we do these videos every single week to give you a little motivation to get in the kitchen and get your keto meal prep and low carb cooking on. Let's go ahead and get into the video. First up, we're trying the Diet Doctor's Low-carb Moussaka. We'll have the original recipe linked down below. I am probably making it a little differently. I have 1 medium-sized eggplant here, and instead of using the whole thing, I'm just going to use half of it. So just trimmed the end off, sliced it in half, and then just to show you kind of a quick way to chop it up, you're just going to slice horizontally through it multiple times. And then you're just going to make little vertical cuts into it, kind of like in the shape of a fan all the way around it. And I'm by no means a professional chef, so I'm not going to do this perfectly, but just a little time saver tip for you all. And then you're just going to slice down, and it's going to give you about the size pieces that you need. And again, I'm just going to do this to half of the eggplant and stick the other half to the side to use in a different recipe some other time. All right, so this is a 2-cup measuring cup, but you can see it's about the same space there. So I'd say I have 2.5 to 3 cups of diced up eggplant. I'm going to use the same cutting process to roughly chop up half of a small to medium onion. It equals out to about 1/4 of a cup to 1/3 of a cup of chopped onion. Now in a cast iron skillet over medium heat, I am adding about 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Once it gets nice and shimmery and up to temperature, I'm going to pour my eggplant into it, and I'm just going to toss that around a little bit to go ahead and start frying it up. Eggplant does absorb oil pretty quickly. To that, I'm adding a teaspoon of sea salt, sprinkling it over it. And I'm also sprinkling a 1/2 teaspoon of ground black pepper over that as well. And now just stirring that around and letting that continue to fry up some. Now I'm adding that chopped onion to our pan, along with a heaping teaspoon of minced garlic. And then this is where it gets really interesting, but stick with me. A teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a tablespoon of just regular paprika, and a tablespoon of dried oregano. And then I'm just going to stir this all in and continue to cook it until it gets kind of brown in color. And to this, I'm going to add 1 pound of ground chicken. Now the original recipe that's linked down below calls for 1.25 pounds, but because I'm also using way less eggplant to make this a lower carb dish, I just went ahead with the 1 pound of ground chicken. Using my handy dandy meat chopper upper, I always have linked in the description box. It's like the best $5 kitchen tool ever. I'm just breaking that apart, not pressing down too hard because I don't want to mush up all of my eggplant. And once I have that broken apart, we can then just use our spoon to kind of mix it around and continue cooking it for a few minutes until our chicken is cooked all the way through. Once it is, I'm adding a 1/2 cup of regular tomato sauce. Make sure again that you check your carbs on that. I'm going to mix this in until it's all combined, and then just leaving it on medium heat. I'm going to let it keep simmering while we make our cheese sauce to go on top. So in a separate tall saucepan, I am adding 3 ounces of cream cheese, 1/2 cup heavy whipping cream, a 1/2 teaspoon of minced garlic, and a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. And then I'm just whisking that around until it starts melting before adding 1/2 of an 8-ounce bag of shredded Gouda. I do prefer to use the non-smoked Gouda. Whisking that in until it starts getting melted, and then I'm adding about 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and again just stirring that until it's fully combined, nice and melted. Then we're going to come back to our eggplant and ground chicken mixture. Going to give it 1 final stir, even out the top of it, and then we're just going to pour our cheese sauce directly on top of this and try to get it as even as possible. And I just used my whisk to kind of spread that out. And then we're going to take the second half of the non-smoked Gouda cheese, again about another 1/2 cup of that, and just spread it out evenly on top of this. Then we're going to pop this whole thing into a 350-degree oven for 20 minutes until our cheese gets nice and brown. This is what it looks like when it comes out. And here it is plated up. Oh my gosh, guys, this low-carb moussaka is the freaking best. You should definitely try this recipe. My husband was blown away at how good it was because I couldn't find the cinnamon to start with. And I'm like, hey, have you seen where I put the ground cinnamon? And he's just kind of like, ground chicken, eggplant, cinnamon? What in the heck is going on in there? He ate 3 servings of this, which is, you know, not good for his macros. pros, but anyway, make sure you give this a try. Next up, I made an original recipe of homemade spicy pimento cheese over low-carb zucchini pancakes. Now, my zucchini pancakes are inspired by a recipe that low-carb Maven did of low-carb zucchini fritters. So to start with, I'm taking a pound of zucchini. I did use a kitchen scale to make sure I had a pound, and I sliced it in half where it would fit in my processor. I have this on the shred feature, and I am just shredding this all really quickly. Now I'm going to take this and transfer it to a colander because we need to drain all of the excess moisture out of it. To assist us in that, I'm sprinkling a teaspoon of sea salt over this, and then I'm just going to use my hands to gently mix that in with the zucchini to make sure it's evenly distributed. I'm going to set this whole thing into the sink while we make our homemade pimento cheese, and that will help draw this water out of the zucchini. Now for our homemade pimento cheese, I'm starting out with some pimentos. These are the ones that I'm using. It's just like a generic store brand. I'm not sure how many. I put in there a couple forkfuls into a mini processor, chopped them all up, and now I'm pouring them in here to show you that it is 1/4 cup minced pimento is what I use. And then I'm using an 8-ounce block of extra sharp cheddar cheese that we grated ourselves with a hand grater. Of course, doing it this way saves you on carbs. It makes it 0 carbs most of the time, but also it's just a better texture and works better for this recipe. I would not recommend making this with pre-shredded cheese. To that, I'm adding 2 ounces of cream cheese, and I just broke it apart. It is softened room temperature. Pouring those pimentos in there. Then I'm going to add some mayo. I prefer to use this Primal Kitchen avocado oil based mayo. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of that. To that, to give it our little spice, I'm adding my favorite garlic chili sauce. This is a tablespoon of that. I'm also adding just about 1/8 teaspoon sea salt. You could add more if you like, but cheese has a lot of salt in it already. 1/4 teaspoon ground black pepper, putting my paddle attachment on my mixer, and I'm just gonna mix this on low until it's combined. And I did use a rubber spatula to, scrape the sides and the bottom to make sure it's all nice and combined into the texture we like. And I do like mine a little chunkier, so there you go. Transferring all of this to a separate dish. And then I'll just stick this to the side so we can get started on our zucchini cakes. Now to a medium mixing bowl, I'm adding 1/2 cup of almond flour, 2 tablespoons of coconut flour, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/4 teaspoon ground black pepper, and 1/4 cup grated Parmesan cheese. And then I'm just whisking this all together until it's fully combined, and I'm gonna stick this to the side. Now to another medium mixing bowl, I am adding our shredded zucchini. I just let it drain in the colander in the sink, and then I wrung out as much of the excess water as I could with my hands, and then with paper towels got the rest of it out. To that, I'm adding 2 large eggs, and then I'm adding about 1/4 cup of chopped green onion. I used the white, the light green, and a little bit of the dark green parts, and then I reserved some of the dark green that we're going to use as a garnish on this later. Mixing that all together. Once it's combined, I'm adding our dry ingredient mixture to it, and also stirring that in really well until it forms kind of like the texture of almost like a biscuit dough, if that makes sense. Now over into a large skillet over medium-high heat. I am adding probably about 5 tablespoons of avocado oil to fry these in. I just kind of pre-separated my dough. We're making 8 of these zucchini cakes. I kind of separated it out into 8 balls, and then I'm taking them one at a time, squishing them in my hand like a little tiny pancake, popping them in that hot oil. I'm gonna do 4 at a time, and I'm just frying these for about a minute on each side, flipping them over to the other side, and then after those fry for about a minute and they get nice and golden, I'm just removing them to a paper towel lined plate, and then you'll just repeat that whole process for your other 4 zucchini cakes. Now to plate these up, I'm taking, I have here 2 zucchini cakes on the plate, and I'm going to top each of them with about a tablespoon and a half of our homemade spicy pimento cheese. And then I also had a couple slices of bacon that I fried, and I'm just crumbling a little bit of that on top of each, and also topping them with a tiny pinch of the green onions that we saved. These are everything that you could wish for. They taste like they have so many carbs in them, and they do not. If you like these, the original recipe for this will be coming to the website soon. It takes me a while to get that on, as I am a one-woman show and I do all of that stuff myself, so bear with me. I'll try to get it on as soon as I can if that's something that you want to try. We are also trying the Diet Doctor's Moroccan beef. Now the original recipe, they made low-carb psyllium husk tortillas with it. We're not going to do that, but I'll link the original recipe down below if you want to try it. So in a large crock pot, I sprayed it with a little nonstick spray, chopped up about 1/2 cup of onion, stuck it in the bottom, top topping that with a 2 to 2.5 pound top round roast, sprinkling that with 1 teaspoon of sea salt. And now here's where it gets a little sketchy. I really thought maybe they had a misprint on this recipe because they're adding 4 tablespoons of garam masala seasoning, and most people that cook with that only use like a quarter of a teaspoon or so of it to just dust their food with at the end. But I went ahead and figured I would give it a shot, and if it was wrong, it would be a fair warning to you guys who may come across this recipe, but it turned out great. So I'm adding 4 tablespoons of that to the top of our roast, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, garam masala seasoning. Popping the lid onto that, and I cheated a little bit and cooked mine. Instead of cooking it low and slow for 8 hours, I cooked mine on high for 4 hours first go around, flipped it over. As you can see, the onions are on top now, and then cooked it on low for another 3 hours. And then I am just using forks to shred this meat up so the seasoning can get all throughout the meat now. I'm going to put the lid back on and just cook it on low for another 4 hours. So I did a total of high 4 hours and low 4 hours. And then here it is plated up. Again, I opted not to make the psyllium husk tortillas, but the original recipe is linked down below, and you can see those there if you want to try yours that way. I plated mine just on some Napa cabbage I had left over in the refrigerator that I wanted to use up. I think it would be really good served with like a homemade tzatziki sauce as well. The seasoning is not overpowering at all, and it made the house smell so great when we were cooking it. Lastly, this week I threw together a meal of convenience just with stuff that I had on hand I needed to get rid of, and I was craving something that was very healthy and nutrient rich. And so this is a chicken feta and kale dish. If you don't like kale, you will hate this recipe but I love it. It's just very simple. So in a large pot over medium heat, I'm adding a couple tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. To that, I added 1/4 of a cup of onion that I just chopped up, and I'm mixing that around till it starts getting soft. Now in my refrigerator, I had left over, if you watched our video last week, we made a pot sticker soup, and for the broth, we strained out ginger, pepper flakes, and garlic. So I had a couple tablespoons of that in the refrigerator that I decided to save. I tossed it in here, along with about 1/2 cup of roughly chopped green bell pepper, and I'm just mixing and stirring all of this for a couple minutes till it starts getting soft and nice and fragrant. To that, I'm adding the leftover remnants, 1 pound of pre-cut raw chicken breast. It's already cut into 1 inch to 1.5 inch chunks, seasoning that with probably 1/4 of a teaspoon sea salt, some ground black pepper, and then I'm just stirring this all together until our chicken starts getting nice and cooked through. To that, I'm adding 1/4 of a teaspoon fennel seed, 1/4 of a teaspoon coriander, and again stirring and cooking this until our chicken is cooked all the way through. To that, I'm adding, I think this is like a 12-ounce bag of frozen kale, stirring from the bottom. We're going to cook this until our kale is all nice and wilted. So just on medium heat, popping a lid on there, letting that cook 10 or 15 minutes. Once all of our kale is wilted to the texture that we want, we're again just stirring it all together. And then I'm topping it with about 1/2 cup of crumbled feta cheese and just letting it sit on there, over medium heat still for a couple minutes for that feta to get warmed and softened. And here it is plated up. Again, if you don't like kale, you will not like this recipe. It tastes just as healthy as it looks. I love it. Kale gives me so much energy, and sometimes when I need a little pep in my step, I like just having a simple, healthy dish. Tastes great left over. Again, if you don't like kale, you could actually use something else in it. I don't know if I'll put up an original recipe for this or not unless you request it, because it's just like thrown together stuff that I had in my fridge. But keeping it real around here, that is how we did it this week. So there you go, guys. That's our keto dinner recipes. If you made it this far, do me a favor, subscribe to our channel so you never miss one of our weekly videos. Share it with your friends if this inspired you or you got anything out of it, and give it a thumbs up if you like it. That encourages us to keep making these videos. Go ahead and check out this playlist that is linked on this end card right here, and you can see a whole bunch of keto dinner recipe and dinner idea videos. And until next time, bye guys.